I mean, I'm a film historian, and I'm interested in the history of aesthetic representations. Because my specialty is silent, actually early cinema, so before the war, it's inevitable that I'm also interested in the ways in which forms of representation that are pre-cinematic affected cinema. Usually people go toward the middle of the 19th century as a kind of source, repository of images, of forms. The picturesque inevitably took me way back. So there's a lot of self-training. I mean, we're all alone somehow. You have to dig and find out how a code got to be arranged, communicated, and got to circulate. And actually, the literature out there is available. You just have to connect the dots. So I think that when we do archaeological, would not even call it archaeological, when we do the history of certain representational forms, because that's what the picturesque is, there is a lot of self-training involved. And a lot of dialogue with other historians who may not be interested in cinema, but whose work affects our own. That's a very good question because it's a very uncomfortable question, because my temptation when I do what you call the deconstruction of the image of the bandito, I'm interested in the visual form that are used to create the allure of the bandito. And it's not necessarily that by deconstructing you are distancing yourself morally from it. To me, the commitment as a visual historian is not to condemn the mafioso. That's somehow obvious. But that comes at the end of a process in which I'm trying to understand which are the forms that enable that construction to emerge and survive over time. And what do they tell us about not just the creators, but also those who received and accepted and processed those images? I'm not saying you have to be agnostic ethically, but ethics is not my main concern. It cannot be. It has to be more formal, but doesn't mean you have to leave aside any ethical consideration. I think it comes with the investigation of the form. So I'm interested in form, but that cannot be devoid of any ethical pursuit at the same time. Thank you. The part of my lecture where I could have gone in a different direction, particularly when I was talking about the ways in which the picturesque traveled to urban America, maybe it's what I need to talk to you about. When Italians came to America, what writers and photographers saw was this interesting mixing of modern urban landscape with this primordial, this primitive natural element, both because the Italian ghetto, so to speak, the Italian neighborhood, had this string of clothes hanging in between the two walls along the street, and also because of the enormous amount of kids crowding the street, and literally providing a very different kind of urban landscape. What these writers did was, and they were not sociologists, they viewed this urban landscape as visually appealing, not despite, but because of the presence of dirt, trash. So you have an aestheticization of poverty, of dirt, of misery, both human and sort of economic, people living in precarious situations, also people living alone or abandonment. And you have, the aestheticization is obviously very problematic from a number of perspectives. So the question one would argue is whether the Italian films that you're referring to in recent times do engage in an aesthetization of the image of these immigrants or populations that are not native Italians, or maybe just look differently. For what purpose? Do they do it to alert the spectator about a problem that ought to be addressed, or are they, travelogue into visual difference for purposes of either delectation or basically get off the hook in terms of morality? It depends on the goal, but clearly poverty on screen can be charming, and that it can be used to charm the spectator or the reader, and that can be problematic or could be a useful tool to communicate civic responsibility, etc. So it's always a matter, but there's a long tradition of that, as you recognize. Thank you.